Okay, declaration of conflicts of interest for councillors. I don't believe we have any conflicts of interest today. No. Declaration of conflicts of interest for staff.
No conflicts of interest for staff, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so first up, 2.1, rating strategy review, 2018 to 2022. Adopt the rating strategy steering committee, terms of reference, and a couple other recommendations there. So I just need a move for that.
So moved it, but I'll move it with an additional, once we get the additional points on the board or recommendations. I'll read that when we get there. It's the original what's been advertised, but with the addition of provide a sitting fee of $300 per meeting for the independent chair to chair the committee meetings and attend council briefings as required. Number 5, provide a sitting fee of $50 per meeting to the committee member. That's what I'll be moving.
That is the move. Yep, that is now the motion. Councillor McKeown, second. Councillor McKeown, wish to speak?
I'll reserve.
Reserve?
I've got to speak.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, sorry.
It's 4 years of a cycle, and we redo the rating strategy. So today it's about setting that process in place. And what we'll be doing is we'll be calling for nominations on the committee. Also, that we'll be. Can you just hold it a moment? Some changes that will be made for this committee is the independent chair will be selected, and they will have no input at the meeting. They will have no voting rights. They were there. They will have to be someone that has the skills and knowledge of the local government rating system that's able to conduct that meeting. I think that's an absolute positive. We'll have three elected councillors, and as I've said before, this is a fantastic experience for new councillors, as it was for Councillor Hill and myself last time. Understanding how the rating system works is a great bonus to us all. So that's a good start. Last time we called, we battled with, there was no excess nominations, but who we attracted were very good. They done the job extremely well and came up with a good outcome. So I have made. So yes, look, I'll put this forward. This will be a great start to calling for the nominations, and I hope that why I put the 2 extra points in. One, the community members are coming to the table as volunteers that apply to go on this committee at the same table as councillors who can get their travelling costs refunded to them. So I think it's appropriate that we do acknowledge the value of them, and also the $300 is to attract the right chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bryan. Councillor McKeown, wish to reserve?
I will speak briefly. Mr Mayor, our council's plan has a very strong commitment to engagement and partnerships with the community. This is precisely this. I think there was only a handful of councillors last term, who actually had such a process. We benchmarked best practice, and I think it was Councillor Hill's suggestion, and we came up with a proposal. The process worked exceptionally well. It was interesting hearing earlier this morning that of that first committee, there were 18 new, productive and effective ideas that came from the committee to council, which was a positive and a bonus. I agree clearly with what Councillor Brunt is saying, that no one should be disadvantaged through being on this committee. The last committee met 8 times. They were quite, as I understand it, was 2 or more hours per meeting. There was a hell of a lot of paperwork and detailed work. People probably put in excess of 50 hours plus to actually do it. The fees that are suggested there are a simple recognition that this is probably quite a unique committee and a different committee from ones that we might form on other things. So I commend this to council as being a fulfilment of its commitment to engagement and partnership with the community.
Thank you, Councillor McKeown. Any councillors to speak against? No? For?
I'd like to raise an amendment.
A further amendment? What is the amendment?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's a fairly simple one to part 4, and that is just the sitting fee for the chair be $150 rather than $300. And I can speak to that if that's, that amendment is seconded.
I will second that amendment.
Councillor Skinner, second that amendment. Please speak.
Thank you. I agree with the sentiment of having a fee for the committee members. It is a onerous task, and it's one that's very valued by a community to review the rates. I guess I was just thinking in terms of the workload, I can't anticipate that it would be 6 times the amount of work, for example, for a chair versus a community member, but I recognise there is a lot more for a chair than for a committee member, but not certainly, certainly not to that difference, if that makes sense. And where my example came out of was recently I've been part of the South Gippsland Water Pricing Review Committee, as I've given the example, 150, it was not 250, sorry, Natasha or Jodie. And that has given an amount of $50 per sitting plus travel allowance. So I guess we're really just covering people's costs, their giving of their time and their costs to come along to contribute to the community, wanting to cover their costs, but also acknowledging that the chair has a bit more of a role, but certainly not 6 times the amount of the role as the other community members. I'll just clarify that's 150, not 250 is what the proposal is on putting there. Thank you.
The councillors, we have that on the board there. Correctly stated now, councillors. Okay. Councillor Skinner, do you reserve or wish to speak?
So this is now the motion.
This is now the
This is the
motion.
motion. There's no reserve. No, it becomes the motion.
It's amendment. Need to second it. Councillor Skinner.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'll reiterate my support for it. I agree with Councillor Brunt and Councillor McEwen. It's a really great example of us working with our community. This is a really key strategy. It's the biggest way that we raise our funds, and that there's very strong and strict terms of reference that will define this committee. So I think an acknowledgement, a small financial acknowledgement of the costs incurred, especially, depending on how long you're driving for, how many hours you're doing up, and I'm happy with that, and I agree that it should be 150 per meeting and 50 for a sitting fee for the community members. Just the other thing, some of these are based on the recommendations from the review from the previous time, and also the reviews from the Local Government Act. And so I think previously it went out twice, the proposal to the community, so it's this time it's recommended that it will only go out once for community consultation towards the end of the strategy development. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner. Also wish to foreshadow if this motion goes down, we'll revert back to the original motion. Councillor Hill.
I'd like to speak against this amendment and I'll keep it brief. We need an independent chair. Now, I don't believe personally that you can have an independent chair who happens to be a member of the South Gippsland Shire. They will have their own vested interests involved, and it will be hard to get an independent chair from South Gippsland. I believe we need to get an independent chair from outside South Gippsland Shire, which would mean they'll have some travel time. So I would think the $300 amount would be just and apt for that situation if the council decides to get an independent chair from outside the Shire. So that's why I'll be voting against the 150.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Councillor Rich, speaking for or against?
To speak for the overall motion, but not necessarily for the amended motion.
No, you've got to speak to the amendment.
Well, okay, so,
Which is now the motion.
No, it's not.
Please, councillors.
so in that case, I'd like to probably ratify Councillor Hill's point of view. If we're going to get a professional in to do a job to help steer and facilitate things, sometimes that smaller investment can give you a much greater saving in the long run. And if we can, have an independent person who is of the top grade, I think the old adage is that the cheapest is not the best, but the best is always the cheapest in the long run. So, if we spend a little bit more now and that gives us a greater result, which is, Councillor Hill's just put a particularly good argument to me. If we want to have someone independent, and South Gippsland's a long way from anywhere, we have to have them to come down from Melbourne. And therefore, who's going to apply for that role? That's where the question comes in. If we set the bar quite low, are we not going to get the calibre of person in that's going to be able to give us the greatest result, which will give our whole community the greatest saving? So that's why I'm going to support, and I will speak to that in a moment, support the overall motion, but I'm not going to support the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Rich. Councillor Keown, speaking for or against?
Against the amendment, Mr Mayor. Our CEO benchmarked the role of the chair of this committee, who is a non-voting member and independent, with the audit committee, and came up with a figure of the $300 was the original one. The issue is that they are not the same type of member as the other members. They are there to be independent chair, to ensure that the governance processes are done properly and that people are treated fairly and participate properly. This is really a question of quality over quantity, in my view. What we're really looking for is someone with an ability to do it. Now, whether we can find someone locally or whether it's going to be someone from outside of the area, it is going to take them a significant amount of time to do this. We have a budget with rates revenue of 36 odd million to spend overall, when you take into account the $50 and what could be up to, say, $3,000 for the chair, it's $10,000. If we got a consultant in on this, we wouldn't get this done for $10,000. It would cost us $20,000 or $30,000. Here we've got the advantage of getting really quality people from the community, strengthening our engagement and partnership, and giving a reasonable remuneration, particularly for the independent chair. Thank you.
Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Keown.
I'd like to speak against the motion. Thanks, Mr Mayor. I believe that South Gippsland has a lot of talent here, and I'm sure that we would be able to find a very capable chair in our area, and I believe that by offering a higher figure, the calibre of person will also, I don't want to say increase, but it would be more, thank you, a higher calibre, thank you. And so, yeah, so I'd like to just, say that I think 150 is probably a little bit short for us to get someone of that calibre. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Keown. Any other councillors? No? Councillor Edwards?
I don't have right to reply.
No, just
You don't.
So I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour of Councillor Edwards' amendment?
It's Councillor Skinner and Councillor Edwards, Mr Mayor.
So those against?
Councillor McEwen, Councillor Brunt, Councillor Hill, Councillor Jeddo, Councillor Brown, Councillor Rich and Councillor Keel. Motion of amendment is lost. We'll return to the original motion and recontinue the debate.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Rich?
I would like to speak on the positive for this, and it comes underneath our council plan in terms of updating and implementing strategies for community strengthening and engagement. I'm new to local government, and I've done a lot of research and study, and I've had a look at what are the ways in which we can engage our community in the right way to get the right feedback and not the loudest voice win, but we actually have. It takes time and money and effort for people to put aside their Thursday night to do that instead of go home with the kids. So some remuneration is definitely necessary to raise the calibre of everyone's input. Now, that's why I'm going to commend this. We do need to put this forward. I'd like to see us look further at other community boards and the way that they can actually help us increase customer satisfaction and reduce our rates in the long run. So I see this as a good first step, and I commend us for putting forward. So thank you very much.
Councillor Rich. Councillor
I'd just like to correct Councillor McEwen, his 19 recommendations from the last committee. He's not been good on numbers. It's 18 years close. The key result outcome from the last great committee was that we had 19 recommendations that we unanimously agreed with by the whole committee, and most importantly, I think, is that quite a few of those were unexpected consequences from, outcomes that we hadn't anticipated before the committee was set up. So that, to me, when a committee can come up with new and original ideas in a difficult area, I think that's a recommendation that it was a success. I'm getting feedback from the community now that there's a lot more interest this time round than last time round. Last time round, a lot of people might have been a bit cynical about this, but I think the feedback was positive in the community, and I believe we're going to get a higher quantity of people apply this time, and I think the calibre will also go up because the community saw that as a really good thing to be involved with. So the independent chair we talked about, yes, that will be an improvement from before. And the last thing I'd like to do is compliment my fellow councillor, Councillor Brunt, who thought up points 4 and 5 yesterday, and I think they are fantastic improvements to the original motion. And by having those new fees, it will certainly raise the calibre. It will acknowledge to the community members that we value their contribution hugely, and I think that will be a really good positive from this next process compared to last month.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Edwards, for or against?
4, actually.
Thank you.
So thank you, Mr. Mayor. My only, obviously my amendment was only about the sitting fee. I'm actually for the essence of the motion in full. I'd just like to clarify something though, and that is the independence of the chair. Obviously there's some difference of definition there, and I'd like to make sure that we don't rule out the independent chair could well and truly come from inside South Gippsland, and we have some wonderful people here that could take on that role. I don't think we should look to Melbourne first. I think that old it's not a healthy thing to do. We should actually look at what have we got here first. Who is willing to put their hand up first? And if we've got somebody local, and there was, all the reports that I've heard, it was very well chaired last time. If there's somebody local who is prepared to stand up and take on that role, then I think we should commend them for doing that. So that's really all. The other inference is this is not a community board. This is a committee that's set up for a certain amount of time. It's not a community board as somebody just defined it as. It is a committee that's set up for a time and then it closes again. So I'm for the motion in its essence. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors wish to speak? Have you got to go to vote, or was there
There's no right reply.
a reply?
Could jump in and do it.
So we'll put it to the vote. All those in favour of the motion with the
Unanimous, Mr. Mayor.
Good. Okay, moving on to planning scheme amendments, C100, the general amendment adoption, and the recommendations that follow various classes of planning. Do we have a move that Councillor Skinner wishes to move? Second.
Sorry.
Councillor Edwards, yeah. Thank you. Councillor Skinner.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll be fairly brief. This is mostly procedural. It's about changing the correct some overlay anomalies in the planning scheme. But what I did want to comment on about this was that there was a number of public submissions that in response to the Section 223 process, which goes out to community consultation. And I was really thrilled that these were listened to and acknowledged. So in this planning scheme amendment, which has to go off to the state government, to the minister, if there's any objections, then that delays that process, has to go to a panel hearing. So it's good for moving this forward. So the two community concerns were around a property in Fish Creek in 15 Old Waratah Road. There were a number of submissions that was zoned PPRZ, which was potentially for use in our future use in the community, and they wanted to keep that. And then the other one was the historical overlay in the Woodlands farm in Stony Creek. That was removed from this amendment because it had a I think it was cream cans to protect the original timber platform stand where the cream cans were placed for collection by the local butter factory. And that's part of our history here. So it's really great to see that we listened to it and we removed those items from it. As part of that Woodlands property in Stony Creek, there was a historic, what's it called, overlay that was historical citation, I think it was called, HO111, that we adopt as part of this movement, and that's what it relates to. So mostly procedural, but I just wanted to comment on that and the pleas that we have responded to our community in that way. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor
Thank you. I agree in the main with Councillor Skinner that this is mainly procedural. I'd just like to touch on though that first point of the block at Fish Creek, because I have had numerous representations on this block. A lot of the people didn't know about the 2T3 process, so that's there's been 14 submissions, which is great, but there's also been a number of people who weren't aware of it. And so I guess what it's saying is that at this stage, it's a block of land which is situated between two residential properties. It's not currently in use of public use as such, but I recognise that it's for not at this stage, and that will be reviewed once we've done our open space strategy, and that'll come back to the table for our panel as has been explained to us. So just to give the people who have perhaps had some varying views on this, that it's not necessarily cut in stone at this point. It is open for further review in the future. That's all. Thank you.
Councillor, any other councillors wish to speak? No? Okay, the vote. For those in favour of the adoption of the amendment?
Unanimous, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, next 2.3, planning scheme amendment for the Senior Housing Settlement Strategy and Restructure overlays. The recommendation there is, so got to move for that, Councillor Crunch. Seconder. Seconder to that. Councillor McKeown. Councillor Branch.
The C90 amendment, it has been being worked on for some time, and we've had several consultation with many landowners that are the holder of a lot of old Crown Township allotments. So across our shire, we've got where there was old mining towns going to be set up, those towns that disappeared, the Crown allotments in little titles all sit there now, all the little titles. So not everyone's totally happy, because if you had 20, what you might have more allotments, they feel like you could sell them individually and get a house on them. But that's not quite the case because of the rural drafts strategy. So what we're offering, and we've got some people that are very pleased that this will be happening, is to consolidate, say, your 20 blocks into maybe 4 or whatever. Just an example, that they then could get housing permits to build on those, and so they could be sold individually. So some see it as a loss, most see it as a gain, because they can move forward. So this is a good this will be a good outcome to outline what those people can do with their titles. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all. I just put it to the vote. Oh, you're sorry.
Very briefly, I support this. If you look at an area like Outram, I think that there was literally thousands of people living in Outram, and it's a nightmare now because you've got the original small allotment blocks. And because of, as Councillor Brunt explained, because of the regulations over septics and what's required, you can't have a house on it. Paradoxically, for some of these people, it might well mean a reduction in rates. because they will have a separate title amalgamated into a larger one. This isn't going to satisfy everyone, as Councillor Brunt said, but it is going to mean a lot of people are actually able to do something on the land, whereas at the moment they're not able to. This was a very thorough process, and I think it was a credit to Councillor Brunt, who was on the committee, and to the council staff that went through quite a laborious process of identifying the various allotments and trying to negotiate appropriate solutions. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Councillor Lee?
Yes, I support this motion as well. Interestingly, the lot that the area that Councillor McEwen just mentioned, I just forgot about that. Yeah, when I saw that the first time before I moved to South Gippsland, I thought it was a massive village at the bottom of the hill, and it was paddocks. I couldn't work it out. So yeah, these are totally inappropriate old developments. This one's from 1890 or whatever, and they don't fit with our current land usage in the Shire. Now, this is separate to our rural land strategy. Our rural land strategy says a house can be put on under 4.1 hectares in the farming zone. This is not related to that. If all these blocks could be built upon, we would have whole townships suddenly appear out of nowhere in the middle of paddocks with no infrastructure and nothing, and totally inappropriate places like on the side of cliffs and things. So this report and this RC, whatever, actually tidies all these up and does allow some dwellings in those areas with consolidated blocks. Now, in the Outram area, there's farms obviously that own lots of those, and some of those individual lots, no one actually knows who owns them. It's just totally gone. So you've got a farmer who's farming land, and inside that farm, he's got a tiny little block there and a tiny little block over here. No one knows whose it is. Can't be traced. So this process allows all of that to be tidied up and fixed up. And so going forward, this will get rid of a lot of the novices who've had in this area for over 100 years.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. I just might speak as well. In relation to the allotments that we have down in my neck of the woods, up in Ventura and Port Washpool and Headley, quite a significant number of old settlement lots that have accumulated over the years. Particularly the ones around Tura, they're now affected by catchment authorities flood overlay as well, so which means that certainly can't be built on, and certainly gives a clear path and direction for those landowners to be able to amalgamate certain titles and clearly defines where they're able to construct houses and not. So hopefully that will aid a lot of community members down in my patch. And I thank the fellow councillors for their comments as well. Thank you.
It's not an against, it's just just a comment about the consultation period, which usually is 4 weeks, and this has been extended to 6 weeks. So that's really great. Thank you.
Any other comments? Good. No? Did we have a
No, there's no against it, Mr Mayor.
all those in favour?
Unanimous, Mr Mayor.
Okay, 4.1, major grant program for children's facilities, capital program. And the recommendation is in the board. Councillor Edwards, you wish to move. Councillor Skinner, second.
Sorry.
Councillor Edwards, do you wish to?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This motion is for Council to submit an application to the Children's Facilities Fund program 2017-18. The program, if successful, will be 75% of the amount that is expected to cost for this project to go ahead. So it's a revamping of the existing building that is the Fishcraft Kindergarten at present. So the estimated cost, as I said, was $230,000. The figure that we've got in there is $168,000 that we're going for a grant, and the balance would be from council funds. This kindergarten is a very important part of infrastructure in Fish Creek because it actually feeds into the school, obviously, and it's very important for our towns to maintain children. We can't imagine a town without children. So if we were to, we need to invest in this now, but also in the longer term as well, to maintain the coming through of children into our small towns. The work itself, having had a child go to this kindergarten for 6 months, I didn't go there myself, we moved to Fish Creek shortly after I was in kindergarten. Currently, it actually lacks a fair bit of privacy for the children, particularly if they're going to the toilet facility. So where they go to the loo is actually also where the children put their bags, and the teachers have to walk past them to go to their facilities. So for children who are concerned with modesty, and they're out of the home for the first time anyway for some of them, it's not a very workable situation. Also, this brings the entrance to the building to the front of the building rather than at current the families need to go around to the behind of the building. So the works just seem to streamline. It makes sense. It actually has the floor plan work a little bit similar to how the Murray North Kindergarten is laid out. So that works very well. That you have an area where the parents drop off before you get into the building, where there's bags and everything, and a separate area which is an indoor-outdoor area for the toilets. So just as a simple floor plan, I think it's fairly straightforward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and apologies, Councillor Keeler. Post there to second that. Just wanted to comment that this is a grant application, as Councillor Edwards said. It's for most of the funding, but a portion of the funding. But most importantly, it's actually identified because it's part of the Corner Inlet Kinder Service, including Tura and Welshpool and Fish Creek, and there's an early years plan around that, identifying improvements across those, and so all of those stakeholders have agreed that Fish Creek, upgrading to the Fish Creek Kindergarten is a priority to use those shared funds. So that's really great. It's alignment with the other kinders. It's not competing. And I agree with Councillor Edwards in terms of the kinders and primary schools, including sporting teams, that they become the lifeblood of the town. When we lose those facilities, we're poorer for it. So it's great to see this improvement going ahead in Fish Creek, and I fully support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Gill, do you want to say yes?
Thank you. Thanks, Mr Mayor. Councillor Skinner's correct. This was identified by the Prom Coast Centres for Children as a project worthy of our support. It includes a compliant access ramp into the building and upgrading and repositioning the kitchen and the office areas to improve the functionality of the building. And it's also extending the facility to provide the compliant toilet area, which is so needed for the children. So as Councillor Edwards has said, this is a $230,000 project. We are seeking 75% as grant money, and so that will only leave a contribution from the council of $57,000 instead of the $160,000 which we budgeted for. So this is a really worthwhile project going forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Gill. So a few words also, the PCCC committee have adopted a strategy, like Councillor Skinner mentioned, and this is part of the way through that strategy and endorsing what we've got here before us today. I just want to commend the committee for the work they've done to date, and they picked up from the previous contractors, and they've done an excellent job. So before the council's here today, I want to thank that committee for the work they've done. Okay, I've got number 4. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour?
Unanimous, Mr Mayor.
Okay, 4.2, proposed sale of council land in Calamvale.
Move that way, Mr Mayor.
Yes, Councillor. Any seconder? Councillor Brown. Thank you, Councillor McKeown.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This has been a project with a long gestation period, but it is one where council, and in fact the previous council, I suspect possibly the council before, have actually looked at Carrabara and said we need to provide some leadership to get some strategic investments in the town. There's a range of work was done by the previous council to ascertain whether there was interest in this land. Eventually we have now got a developer that's interested in this land. What this motion, which is an unusual one, but it is quite proper use of the Local Government Act, is to sell the land which is the library site, I think number 1 King Street in the old Birralee site, by private treaty to a particular person for a particular outcome which is of social and economic benefit to the Shire. This supermarket will be a mainline supermarket if it proceeds, and my understanding is I think it was 40 or 48 additional jobs to the town and additional service, and it will revitalise the town. The concept of a private treaty is one whereby if you're attempting as a council to provide leadership in getting a facility or an amenity like this, there is a way of doing it and negotiating in a transparent and accountable way. And what that entails basically is council getting a valuation on the site, and then the proposed purchaser getting a valuation, and then going through a negotiation. It has to be transparent. It has to be accountable. In the end, it has to be signed off by the auditor and the Auditor General. So it is a technical term. Sorry, it's not free, it's not largely used, but it is used in situations like this where you're trying to get a particular outcome. The reality is that council has had a presentation from the developer. We are potentially talking about an injection of $20 to $30 million in Carrambara, which is sorely needed. And that would be Commercial Street, the Railway Street precinct, the supermarket, and other subsequent use for the previous supermarket. So this is a really significant investment in the community. But in doing this, council has done an engagement plan and endorsed it, saying exactly who we're going to consult and over what, both over the public treaty, over there's going to be users of the existing facilities that may have to shift. We've made a clear commitment to the community that there will be an interim accommodation solution for all of the current users of buildings, and there will be, in the end, some form of community hub that would probably be the future location of most of those bodies. So, all in all, this is a fantastic outcome, and it's the effort of at least 2 councils, if not 3. There's been a huge amount of work done by council's planning staff, and indeed by the State Government Centre's Planning Task Force to help us identify where would be the best site for a supermarket. So it's potentially a win-win, but I would stress 2 things. One, all of the existing users of the buildings will be looked after, and they are being negotiated and worked with properly. And 2, the sale by private treaty is a legitimate process that will be transparent and will be accountable, and it has to be ticked off by our auditor and by other agencies. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gill. Councillor Brown.
That was well spoken by Councillor McEwen. I think he's summed it up pretty well. Essentially, this is a very important project to Carrambara, and Carrambara have been waiting for something like this for a long time. As it says, we endorsed the Carrambara Supermarket Development Engagement Plan in June, and this is just the next process with that. So I would ask councillors to please support this process.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Any other councillors wish to comment? Councillor Rich?
4.
Against or for?
Yeah, I'm for. Is there any against? No.
Yeah, no. Against, for? So,
I'd also like to commend the amount of work that's gone on to get to this point. As much as I'd hope that we can do it a little bit quicker in future, it's always good that we get somewhere. I think it's wonderful what we've been presented so far with the new redevelopment of the supermarket and the other aspects there. In particular, the regional produce that they have promised to showcase. So for me, hopefully when people, at the moment you drive through Carrambara and it just doesn't really have that vibrancy, this may change that whole aspect, but I would prefer to go through there and shop there than I would somewhere else. So that, to me, this whole process, all the background work that gets done to get us to hopefully that point, which is the outcome I'm looking for, this is a wonderful milestone along the way. So I implore everyone to support it.
Yes, Councillor McEwen has fairly well summed up the process. Before the last council, in the previous council, there was a lot of work done on, there was a desire from the community, shown by the community, to have two supermarkets so that there was competition. That hasn't happened, but this has certainly been an outcome of that. And here we are today about trying to make it happen through this process. And I just commend the amount of work of where we've got to I acknowledge the supermarket owner for wanting to put that amount of investment into the project, and I think Carrambara will be well pleased if we can pull this off. And I think that's great. Thank you. Just yes, ask everybody to vote for it.
Any other councillors wish to speak? No, we'll put it to the vote. All those in favour?
Unanimous, Mr Mayor.
And 4.3, proposed road deviation and exchange in Stony Creek, Wise Road.
I'd like to move that, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Keogh moved it. Do you have a second? Please. Thank you, Councillor Keogh. Speak.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is just going out for a 223 process. It's Moyes Road is a government road in Stony Creek. Part of the road has had improvements on it by an adjoining landowner, and another part of the road is on private land. So we're just going to realign it and bring it all into line. So yes, I'll just commit to go out to the 223 process. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor.
I'll concur with Councillor Keogh. It seems very straightforward. It's actually quite funny when you look at the map on Google Maps and you think, how did that actually work? But it's obviously been there for a decent length of time, and this is just swapping one part of land for another, and it seems to just make sense. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. There's any other councillors wish to speak against? No, put it to the vote. All those in favour?
Unanimous, Mr Mayor.
It's 6.1, the VCAT determination. Councillor Hill, this is Councillor the conduct panel. I'll move for that one. I'll move that, Mr. Goshen. I'll second it. Councillor second.
Who was the second? Sorry, Mr Mayor.
Councillor
Councillor Thank you.
Okay, councillors, so you'd be aware that we have a finding on the conduct panel that was appealed by Councillor Hill. Sorry. Councillor Hill in relation to when it went to the Civil Administrative Tribunal. Most of us have seen the documentation by Jared Butcher, the senior member who facilitated the appeal. Interesting to note is in the general comments on 26. As is often the case in local government environment, there were differences of opinion between members of the council concerning various matters. This is particularly so between Councillors Hill and Fawcett. I've no doubt that these differences of opinion led to the making of complaints against Councillor Hill. Those differences of opinion cost the council quite significantly, and it would be remiss of me if I didn't make mention of the cost of all those panel hearings in regard to. Of course, there's other details within there in regard to the comments from the senior member. They're just a couple I picked out. An interesting quote that I came across recently by Leonardo da Vinci: "The greatest deception men suffer is from their own opinions." So when you consider that, obviously he didn't say anything about ladies in his comments, but that's one I picked out there. So it is, taking that into account, the opinions of some people that get drawn into such a debate and then eventuate into a VCAT hearing is a lesson to be learnt. Thank you for that, councillors. So, seconder, Councillor Brunt, do you wish to?
Yes, I'll make a quick comment, Mr Mayor. I think there's been a lot said and a lot learnt. I'll note, Mr Mayor, there are factual errors within the report. In the first instance, the date that the hearing sat, I note on the front page, there's an omission of the 2 days in January 2017 of that hearing. And if you check the front page, it only lists the 18th and 19th of August and the 14th and 15th of November. There were 2 more days. Within the report, there's other factual errors within this report. There's been a misinterpretation of evidence. I'm not going to go over it. The minority report, just for one, I am satisfied. Point 22 says, I'm satisfied the report had concurrences of at least one other councillor. This is factually incorrect, as the other councillors were Fawcett and Brunt. It's a total, and this is what the final outcomes were made of. The order originally was, the date of the order was the 10th of August 2017. There was no decision made. Oh, wait a minute. That's when the final outcome was come. That's when the final thing was handed down. Beg your pardon?
Please continue, but gallery keep their comments to themselves, please.
Sorry, that's just thrown me a little bit. That was when the conclusion of this hearing was handed down. There's been, when it first was lodged, I believe it was sometime in August 2016. From when the hearings took place, 18th and 19th of August, 14th and 15th of November, and 2 days in January. It took, from the time that hearing concluded until the 10th of August 2017 to have an outcome. Some of this, there is confusions in this report that evidence was based on. I think the original conduct panel had 2 panel members that came to the original outcome. And we have read these statements in the press that Councillor Brunt is responsible for the costs, all the costs. There is no policy, there's no strategy that says if a ruling is overturned that the respondent has to pay. There has to be a better formal process to deal with issues between councillors. Because when you pay a conduct panel $30,000, who hands down a finding, and it then can be overturned through a VCAT order, and that is one of the things I believe that's been handed into the review of the Local Government Act. That's one suggestion, that you cannot come back. Because of this, you cannot come back and challenge that finding. Mediation was offered on the first panel, but was not attended.
Point of order. Councillor Brunt is speaking.
Please state your point of order.
Point of order is Councillor Brunt is speaking untruthfully now.
You don't need applause.
Can you?
I require applause. Councillor.
106A must not accept any questionable statement which appears to be derogatory or defamatory to any member, blah blah blah. So making sense which is untrue.
Very difficult to even make a ruling given I wasn't there at the time. But,
Mr. Mayor, could I rephrase the sentence?
if you could, thank you.
Is that okay with you, Mr. Mayor, that I continue?
That's rephrase.
Mediation failed as no agreement could be reached between the parties. And I don't believe, when I got to mediation, when I had my turn, I was immediately told when I walked in there will be no mediation. So I'll just make that point clear when we talk about it. And it could have been, all that was asked for was an apology, a simple apology that was never delivered. But whether, I'm sure Councillor Hill is elated about this, I certainly have my reservations, and I'm not going to go through the report and nitpick in the report, because I know that there was errors in the last summations of that the judgment was handed down on. There was a mixing of evidence in here. There's absolute incorrect But of course, maybe that's been the benefit of having a QC on your side, and that's what you're paying for, so that's okay, or whether they're just a friend. So, look, I'm happy to accept the report. I've got no problem with that. Well, the outcome is the outcome. I recognise the money that was spent. I find it, and the key points are that you could have accepted the finding there was 6 months training. That's all it was. That was the finding. So that's okay. That's Councillor Hill's challenge to overturn it. He's happy with that. I'm not responsible for this money that's being printed in the paper. Thank you.
Right. Councillor Hill. I'm sorry, my apologies. Who was the second? Councillor Brunt, sorry, my apologies again. So, yeah, any councillors wish to speak against?
Not against.
For? Councillor Richard.
Look, this I think is a fascinating example of collaboration versus adversarialism. As we can see, that we have previous council, they weren't particularly happy. There was an adversarial process that they went through. They didn't come to a conclusion that would seem satisfactory to anyone, certainly not our ratepayers. And the reality is that, you know, if we collaborate, and I think that I spoke when we had the local council inspector, David Wolf, here I said, look, you know, there's one thing to try and force us to follow the law.
Yeah.
Point of order. The debate's not relevant to the motion. It's point 63A. I think this is, we're just tabling a report.
Thank you.
Yeah.
63A.
We need to keep it relevant to the motion.
Yes, well aware that the course is true. Yeah, I'll hold that in regard to course 63A, the debate must be talks before the chair can speak to the
adoption of the report. I mean, that's,
Can you roll it to the recommendations?
This is this is actually going to the heart, by the way, I would like to put to you of what we are talking about. There is a process that has happened. There is a VCAT decision that has been made. There is implications to learn from, and there is processes that we now need to fill in. So my comments go exactly to that this is what we have had to go through, and it has been a cost, and Councillor Brunt rightly relays the cost because she's concerned that there was a cost to the community. And Councillor Hill is also concerned that he was going to be misrepresented of being you know, charged for doing something that he didn't feel was wrong. So therefore the comments that I make now I find particularly relevant, that we need to, as councils and as a council, adhere to our collaboration, which is in our code of conduct, rather than to degenerate into an adversarial fight which ends up in a process like this, which doesn't help our shire. So that was the reason that I was raising that comment. So if Councillor Edwards would like to be adversarial, please.
Point of order, I'd like to raise it as a breach of code of conduct is there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like you to note that.
Do you want to raise it as a point of order or as a breach of the code of conduct?
I'd like to know, have you noted it as a breach of the code of conduct, whether I choose to do anything with it or not.
So it's not a point of order?
It's not a point of order, but I would like to speak to the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Hill.
It appears I'm on a different planet to my fellow councillors. The clear finding of this panel was it was a frivolous process which was over a difference of opinion, which cost, what, $40,000. That's the finding. In context, there was serious bullying going on in that council. There was a finding against a councillor of serious bullying. It was not a safe environment. It bears no relationship.
Please state your point of order.
Not relevant to the motion. I think it's our motion. Oh, sorry.
One
When
of
I,
those.
You call the point of order.
yeah, 63, that must be relevant to the motion.
Claim 63 vote must be relevant to the motion. Debate does need to be relevant. Councillor McEwen, so please ensure that is.
Mr Mayor,
I'll
One point of order.
Thank you, Councillor. So Councillor Skinner, I will uphold your clause 63 on that. So Councillor McEwen,
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The findings of the panel, and the panel, by the way, has to re-examine the whole of the case. So the first panel, in fact, law doesn't exist. They examined the whole case again, is a total and utter vindication of Councillor Hill, of his integrity, of his honesty, of his willingness to speak and work with people with courtesy, and to his respect. Any other suggestion to that is malicious and libelous.
point of order, Mr Mayor. I'd like to raise 63 again, but I'd actually like the motion to be put because this motion is only about tabling a report. It is not about whether debating the contents of it, it is tabling the report. And I'm speaking, I will actually be in favour of the report to be tabled.
thank you, Councillor Edwards. So 63, I believe Councillor McEwen is speaking to the
Yeah,
motion.
thank you, Mr Mayor. Sorry.
Sorry.
Now, this has been a significant cost to council and to Councillor Hill. There have been financial costs to council. There's been reputational damage done to council through what the findings was that it was a frivolous case. And there have been significant costs. Although Councillor Hill has been vindicated, he was pillared by a range of former councillors in the media and blamed. But this is a clear vindication of him. I might like to, I do want to make some comments that some of the comments in regard to Councillor Brunt may well be running very close to contempt of court. You cannot argue with a finding.
Point of order.
Point of order, please.
That's an active disorder.
On the number.
73, go to 73.
Councillor Edwards.
C. 73 C.
Right, can you, could you get Councillor Edwards'
Anyway, it's a active disorder.
So what?
Active 73C, any active disorder. Contempt of court.
I think you have to look up.
We're tabling a report to be accepted or not accepted. That's all this is.
Mr Mayor, the point of order, she cannot debate a point of order.
I don't see any, anything there, Councillor Edwards, that,
What is contempt of court?
yeah, yeah. Okay, so we'll uphold that, Councillor Edwards. So Councillor McEwen, would you retract that comment and proceed?
I will retract that comment and proceed. If people have doubts about a tribunal's finding, there is a legal process of appealing it to the next level of the court. And you are skirting on very dangerous territory when you actually factually say there was something wrong in a report. That's all I was saying. This is really a sad day for council. Hopefully we've got rid of that. There is no bullying going on in this council. I saw real bullying going on in the previous council. So I commend that this report be tabled and that we note it, and as Councillor Rich said, that we attempt to work collaboratively rather than going through the adversarial role, which costs money, destroys reputations and does no good.
Okay. Councillor Hill, speak your hand.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to refute one thing that Councillor Brunt said, that about mediation. 3 of the 4 complaints made against me, I never saw or heard anything about until I received notification that I was going to a co-tribunal. There was no mediation about those points. I'd like to make a statement. In 2015, 3 councillors from the majority bloc on the last council instigated a complaint against myself on the following 3 points. A, that I was dishonest in regards to a letter to the newspapers regarding the municipal office project. B, that I was discourteous and intimidatory towards council staff during a briefing on June the 3rd. C, that I was dishonest in the writing of a report critical of council forces chairing of the committee. I have been exonerated of all those charges made against me. The findings: A, there was no evidence of dishonesty on my part regarding the letter to the newspapers on the costs of the municipal office project. B, a councillor or councillors sought to have an officer complain about my behaviour towards the officer. I was not discourteous or intimidatory towards council
Point of
staff.
order.
Councillor Brunt, point of order.
(73) and I'd like the opportunity to explain why, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, please.
Could I
Yes, please.
speak? Where the report says that an officer tried to make other that was an officer tried to, that was a finding, that was a bad report, that was a bad finding, an incorrect finding.
So,
I can only deal with one at a time. And the officer, it says the officer,
Point of order, sorry, Susan Batey.
no, I'm not. It talks about the officer. That's one of the points that is wrong in the report.
So, thank you. I'll uphold that for 73B. Councillor Hill, could you please retract that?
I can't. It's in the report.
It is in the report, but that's one of the parts.
If I may continue, Mr. Mayor, I'm reading these points straight out of the report.
Please proceed.
I will repeat that point. Point B, a councillor or councillor sought to have an officer complain about my behaviour towards the officer. That's out of the report. I was not discourteous or intimidating towards council staff. That's out of the report. Point C, I was entitled to produce a report, brackets, which contained a criticism of Mr. Forster's chairing, and that the report did not involve dishonesty on my part. Point D, the differences in opinion between Fawcett and myself led to the making of these complaints against me. E, I was exercising my role as a councillor in good faith and that no elements of dishonesty were evident in my actions. They were all from the report. Now, my comments about those last 2 points. The judge decided that there was a political decision made by a group of councillors to proceed with these complaints because I had different points of view to them. That's a political decision, and I believe, and I stated at the time, that it was designed to damage my reputation with a view to me not getting elected in the last election. Now, the cost, which is in the media at the moment, $39,000 was spent by 3 councillors who chose to use the process which cost the ratepayers $39,000. They instigated this. The final decisions come back. They had no grounds to make any complaint against me. They, I believe, are responsible for that cost to the ratepayer. Now, I'd like to close by saying that I'd like to offer my thanks to all those individuals who showed me such strong support throughout this process. It was many, many people who contacted me about this. Top of the list would be my wife and my family. And I would be remiss if I did not express my huge appreciation to Mr. Vincent Orfini, QC, who represents me pro bono. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. If we can put this to the vote now. So all those in favour?
I haven't spoken.
Accepting the report.
You can't go back.
Yep, that's unanimous, Mr.
You
Mayor.
can call. You could.
Okay, we'll move on. Yeah, 8.1.
There was a other reports to do with seats that I wanted to raise.
Oh, certainly, yeah, we'll move into that.
I thought we were in other reports.
Yeah, council expenditure report.
Oh, I was moving that, yes.
Councillor Grant, seconder. Council expenditure report.
I've lost my place again.
Who's driver seconder? Councillor Skinner. Okay. Councillor Grant.
The councillor expenditure report from July, which recognises from July the 1st, 2016 to the 30th of June 2017. We're in under budget at this point in time, which is, there were allowed 361,000. We're actually 27,000 below budget. That's, a little bit of that is the election period where there was no expenditure accepted in a 1 month period, 6 weeks period, something like that. And also this report actually reflects some of the new councillors' expenditure and some of the returning and the 3 returning councillors. So the 3 have a full 12 months, the rest have, I can't add up, is it 9? Yeah, 9 months expenditure. So yes, there is varying amounts in there. And I'd like to point out that the suggestion of owing money, I'm $9,000 cheaper than the other 2 councillors. But apart from that, that's okay. Various councillors do various things, travelling to meetings and distances, and that may change their expenditure. We also have Councillor Edwards who has childcare. If we can't refund that, we don't get a younger person as a family, as a representative, and we need to do those costs. So, look, I'm happy to put this to move today. I'm happy to put it to vote if anyone has no objection. I will come back and mention about referencing this to the audit committee to see whether we could get a sunset clause on it so that we do have year-to-year, proper year-to-year financials and not something that can be held over from X amount of years back to how long it may be. So that report will come to, that final report of the audit committee will no doubt come to us shortly, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Councillor Skinner.
I'd like to put it to the vote, Mr Mayor.
If there's
Unless
no
anybody.
You're reserving, Councillor Skinner?
I'll reserve.
You're reserving, Councillor.
Well, it's good to see that the total package for council expenditure came in under budget. Despite all the stuff we've read in the papers in the last 12 months or so about how we were ripping off the ratepayers and Rorting system and whatever, it's good to see we're not actually doing that at all. And I'd like to express my appreciation for Councillor Edwards for racking up in 9 months $66 more than me in 12 months. So in the last council, Councillor McHugh and I were the only ones with cars, and we took the brunt of the complaints in the press. You can see that Councillor Edwards is stepping up to the mark now. So it shows that we're actually working quite hard. The councils that have council cars, that total cost is not actually reflected properly in the year statements because the cars are amortised over 4 years. And it actually, I think, costs more for council cars, but the way it's all financially done doesn't necessarily appear that way. But I'm not going to criticise another councillor who actually spends more on their car if they're using their car. My car has hit several wombats in its journey around doing jobs for the Shire. Each time it's a $900 bill for me.
Did you get the name of the wombat?
That does not get claimed back off council. So there's extra costs involved for people using their own car. But the point I want to make is, if I see a fellow councillor who is actually using or getting more claim back for using of their car, that tells me that they're actually doing a lot of work. They're driving around, attending more meetings, more functions and so on. Because councillors don't get in their car and just drive around the countryside to put their mileage up. They go to a place. It could be an AGM, it could be a rec reserve that they are a committee member of, or it could be other functions to do with their job as councillor. The press should be reporting how much good work those councillors do, and Councillor Edwards, I made a joke, a light-hearted joke earlier, Councillor Edwards obviously attends lots of council functions and is a fine example in the community of interactions between councillors and the community. And I commend Councillor Edwards for having such a claim of her car, because it means she's doing a fantastic job out there in the community. A lot of time and effort goes into attending all those things. No one, as a councillor, would put in a claim for the use of the car if they were trying to make money out of it, because they would be spending hours going to a rep reserve meeting to put down, what, $10 of petrol expenses. You don't work for that rate. This is all time that councillors put in for the community, and they should be applauded, not criticised by certain members of the press, which I view as very low, poor form. They should be acclaiming those councillors who are putting in above what's expected of them.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors wish to comment? No?
I'd like to put it to the vote. No, I'd like to put it to the vote, thanks.
Put it to the vote. All those in favour of accepting the council expenditure report? 2017.
Unanimous, Mr Mayor. Yeah.
Okay, assemblies of councillors, 8.2.
Someone's been.
I'd like to move that in block, Mr Mayor, 8.2 and
8.3.
8.3.
3. Okay, all those, do I have a second for that?
Yeah.
Second, Councillor Keeling.
Sorry.
Okay, incidentally, 8.3 is document seals and water extended by the CEO. Okay, Councillor Skinner, do you wish to speak on those two items?
I don't think they need much speaking to. They're really a list of all of the activities, meetings, etc. that we have done as councillors, assemblies of councillors, and then there's a whole range of documents that have been sealed or awarded by the CEO under his power of delegation, his or her power of delegation, and there's about a lot of them, 42 of those. We'll note that there are in the report a fairly hefty insurance premiums that we do pay. And yeah, so I'm happy to just move that as a block.
So, Councillor Keeling?
Yeah.
Yeah, so shall we put it to the vote? Sure. Now, those in favour of 8.2 and 8.3?
Unanimous, Mr Mayor.
Okay, councillor reports. Okay, yeah, I've got one request for leave of absence first. Yeah, we don't have any.
No, we don't have any, Mr Mayor.
Okay, councillor updates, and now on to the reports. So, Councillor Skinner first. Councillor Skinner.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just briefly, as Councillor Hill commented, we all do a lot of driving around in meetings, etc., meetings with our community. So it's good to just sometimes dot point some of the highlights over the month. So for me, I attended the Stockyard Gallery AGM in Foster, which is a Section 86 committee of council that undertakes a range of exhibitions each year, as well as providing an outlet for local artists to sell their wares. It's staffed and managed entirely by volunteers, and so the AGM is a really great opportunity to reflect on the work of the committee and to also invite new members to join the committee. While most positions were filled at that AGM, there is still a role as secretary available, so they're going to continue to look for somebody who will fill that. And it was great to see that the committee developed a strategic plan in collaboration with, or using the resources of council through the volunteer officer Dana Hughes. So she's really helped them to develop a strategic direction for the gallery. So many thanks to those. Councillor Brunt and I attended an induction session with the West Gippsland Regional Library Board in Warragul last week, as Councillor Edwards had stepped away from that position. And it was really great to have an overview of they've recently got a new CEO in Leanne Williams, who is has brought in a range of administrative service reviews and new branding to reflect the graphic and branding trends emerging now. So there's really some exciting projects and innovations that are being developed in that in our library service. So we support our library service along with our neighbouring shires. So, and then the Grants Only group had their AGM this month. Now the Grants Only group's a really interesting model. They were established as a pilot project through the Lower Tarwin Valley project, which was a partnership with Gibbs Dairy, the Gardner Foundation and the local our shire, and working in a small area. So this was, as I said, a pilot group. They're a group of volunteers who worked together to put together grant applications for small community groups. So a lot of small groups, for example, maybe the church or the primary school, etc., find grant writing a bit daunting, and they also don't understand where there's a huge range of grants available. So this group's been working now as volunteers for 6 years. They have a 43% success rate with their grant applications. They do offer volunteers. They take a small administrative fee, $50 for the application, and then for the very large grants, they attract up to a $400 fee for the application. Nevertheless, it's an absolutely amazing model, and I'd love to see. So I fully congratulate the volunteers who put in a really significant amount of time undertaking that for our community, but I'd also like to really see that trying to be championed or replicated in other areas in our shire. I think we've got the resources to help assist that in other areas, and I'd like to see that. And finally, we had the start of the community engagement around the Shire Capital Works allocation funding for the Venice Bay Skate Park and Youth Precinct this week. So we had about 25 community members representing most age groups, and there was discussions about the elements that are needed in the skate precinct and debate about the potential location. So, and that's an exciting project for Venice Bay with 125,000 confirmed funding to achieve this project this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner. Councillor Rich.
Thank you very much. I attended South East Australian Transport Strategies meeting last week, which was held at Sale, which is somewhat relatively local, considering how far and wide the lobby group works from. It's from just south of Sydney to just west of Melbourne, and it's probably one of the second or third largest lobby groups to do with freight and transport in Australia. When I presented to them, we presented some of the projects that we're quite proud to currently have underway in South Gippsland, which is looking for the Black Spur project, which is about to start. Also the announcement of the $300,000 for the improvements to South Gippsland Highway near Coal Creek, and it's also pleased to announce that we've got $500,000 worth of funding for examining potential upgrades of the Bass Highway between Anderson and Leongatha. But more heartening than that was its very collaborative meeting with our neighbouring shires in particular wanting to work towards having a possible integrated management and integrated transport plan. Everyone is starting to recognise across shires, across Victoria, that we have a rate capping, so therefore what are our other sources of funding? Our other sources of funding are getting government grants from the federal or the state government. To get those, we have to be aligned. We have to have our policy and our strategies aligned with the state and the federal, and that means two things. That means having both our long-term visions and plans in place, but also having shovel-ready projects, because oftentimes what a state government will do is the state government will have a certain amount of funding each year that will go towards roads and transport. They will more than likely, let's not comment too much on how the state government likes to port barrel, but they will more than likely spend those money in the seats that are marginal, which leaves a certain amount of funding each year that they give away, oftentimes with a very short lead time. So we need to have shovel-ready projects, because they might say in 30 days, who's got a project to do a road? Now, everyone knows that in 30 days there's no way an engineering department, an economic and development department and everything can get all those things together. So we need to start working strategically ourselves as a shire to have those in place. We need to work with our neighbouring shires so that we can bring down those costs And so that when that funding is available, when the government finally does say, wait a tick, who has a project that fits these requirements, we are ready to go. So I think it was a very successful meeting at SEATS last week. And I'm proposing that we look to co-host with Bass Coast in February, a SEATS meeting. That was discussed, it's ongoing, but that would once again look to being able to collaboratively work with our shires, our neighbouring shires, keep our costs down and hopefully get us the greatest return for our region. So I thought that was a very good meeting, and I'd like to bring that back to Council Field.
Thank you, Councillor Rich. Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll be really brief. The Mayor and I represented the Council at the Vietnam Veterans Recognition Day last Friday, and I must admit I was very proud to be there and be part of the recognition for our veterans in South Gippsland. I was also attended a Councillor Development Weekend down in Torquay, which I found extremely beneficial. Hopefully it will make me a better councillor, that's what it was all about. Councillor Skinner and Councillor Edwards and I also were part of the South Gippsland Business Women's Network AGM the other night, where 112 of our local business ladies all were there, and it was, I must admit, it was very, very encouraging to see so many young women stepping up and having their own businesses, so that was fantastic. Councillor Edwards and I also were at the PCRT meeting on Monday, and the Mayor and I were at the Emergency Planning Committee meeting, which was really, really well attended by all the services earlier this week. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gill. Any other councillors?
I was just going to add only that I just would like to commend something out of our ward, but Councillor Keel and I ambushed the Canberra Business Association meeting the other night, and I'd just like to commend them on such a wonderful group. And ward councillors, you're very lucky to have such a vibrant town in your ward, as we all have vibrant towns in our wards, obviously. But what a great group, because such optimism and such, a glass half full kind of group. And I just think it's fantastic, and they need to be commended for all the work that they do. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Amongst many of the other places that I went to, one which I'd like to just bring to the attention of the council. So I attended the SCS's Eastern Regional Annual Award Ceremony. That was held in Leongatha on the weekend on Sunday. In attendance, of course, from many of the regional managers of the SCS, was also State Government for Eastern Victorian member Harriet Shing, and I was also joined by the Deputy Mayor of Latrobe Shire Council. Amongst the units that attended, which was, like I said, the Eastern region, which covered pretty much from Phillip Island right through to Yarram, as the Eastern region has to be split for the award ceremony, otherwise there'd be too many recipients to deal through. The Leongatha unit, I'd just like to acknowledge within our shire and the fantastic work that goes on in the Leongatha unit. Judy McLeod, 10-year medal and certificate. Diane Lindhart, 10-year medal. Aaron Wilson, a 20-year bar and certificate. And Jeffrey Murray, a 25-year bar and certificate. That is a substantial contribution, and as with the other members too, they do a fantastic job, and this council is indebted to the work that our emergency volunteers do within our area. Other reports, committee updates. Do we have any committee updates?
No, Mr Mayor.
No.
Well, it's actually the next item,
Urgent or other business?
Advisory is urgent or other business. I think it's grant related.
Yeah, we're coming up to that, which is in regard to a Sport and Recreation Victoria programs grant, which involves a number of applicants with various organisations. So this grant application is due prior to our next meeting, so we're bringing it forward under urgent and other business. So do we have that up on the 15? Yeah. So I need,
Yeah, we need
put
to
all
do
that,
it.
yeah, thank you. Go through the items.
Is there any more detail about what that actually is? Or?
I'll move it for the sake of
Don't know what
the
it is.
rest of it.
Just have a,
But we need to move
Say
it.
yeah.
We can't.
Who's seconding it?
We can't until we know what it is. We
Yeah.
need to understand what we're.
Mr Mayor, the first part of the, if you go back please, Joe, the first part is saying that we have an urgent an urgent item of business because we have to have the application is required to be submitted before the next ordinary meeting of council. So if council's of the view that it may wish to make a submission, you could take this as urgent business and say, yes, that is urgent business. Then you can debate whether you want to apply for it or what you want to do with it. So to provide further information, we can have a look at what the matter is now, but that shouldn't impact on your decision regarding making a decision with the view that you may want to put an application in prior to the next ordinary council meeting. Whether you actually do or not is the next part of the debate. So that's the first one. So if you'd like to scroll to the next one now, please, Jodie. So if it passes, you will then consider this and debate this.
So we're accepting it as urgent business.
Yes.
It's not moving to accept it as urgent business. So we need to.
I'll second that.
Second, councillor Grant.
Oh, Peter,
So we consider the recommendation.
Okay, so we have to vote on that.
Yes.
So all those in favour of accepting this as urgent business?
Unanimous, Mr Mayor.
Now,
So now we need a,
Can we read it,
can we read for it, please?
I'm happy to move that, Mr Mayor.
You happy to move that?
Yep.
Are there any further points?
Oh,
Yeah, there is no
So, Mr Mayor, perhaps I might just read out the recommendation for council, given that this is something that's come a little bit out of left field.
yeah.
So every year that there's the sport and recreation grant that council applies for, and we work with our community and recreation reserve committees to get these grants across the line. So there's a lot of work that goes in the background. Now, I apologise, Mr Mayor, but I can't advise why this has suddenly become urgent business. The state government may have shifted the deadline date just in the last 3 hours? Days. Okay, so in the last 3 days. So, so we're now in a position where council, and we would normally bring a report to council that details this at the next meeting, which was our plan, but we need to now bring it forward. So it's recommending that council applies for $100,000 to the Sport and Recreation Victoria 2018-19 Community Sports Infrastructure Fund. The minor category for the Leongatha Gymnastics Facility Redevelopment Project. Allocate $60,000 from the 2018-19 Community Infrastructure Projects budget towards the Leongatha Gymnastics Facility Redevelopment Project if the application is approved by Sports and Recreation Victoria. Advises the Leongatha Gymnastics Club that any project overruns are the responsibility of the committee to fund in accordance with Council's Community Project Management Policy and Guidelines. So just before I go on to the next point, Council does have a budget of money set aside to support community infrastructure projects. So this isn't allocating any more money that hasn't already been allocated. There's already a fund with money in it. And as the year goes by and projects come up, it's simply council then simply allocates money out of that fund. So you're not actually making a decision to allocate money that's not already in the budget. It's actually being now specific to where that specific money is going to go. So it's in a bucket of sports and recreation grant money, and now you're saying out of that, these bits go to these projects. That makes sense. The next one is applies for $100,000 to Sports and Recreation Victoria 2018-19 Community Sports Infrastructure Fund, minor category for the Currumbara Skate Park Development Project. allocates $100,000 from the 2018-19 Community Infrastructure Projects budget towards the Carnbarra Skate Park Development Project if the application is approved by Sports and Recreation Victoria, and notes that $50,000 has already been directed towards the project through the Community Capital Works allocation process. Notes that any cost overruns of the Carnbarra Skate Park Development Project will be met by Council. And then provide staff resources within funding allocated in the total project cost for management of the projects if approved by Sports and Recreation Victoria in the 2018-19 financial year. Notes that the project proposals for the Carnbarra Recreation Reserve Change Facilities Development was withdrawn as requested by the Carnbarra Recreation Reserve Section 86 Committee at the Carnbarra City Soccer Club due to the cost of the project. And notes that the Leongatha Town Cricket Club Committee and Tarwin Recreation Reserve Committee advised Council that they did not want Council to submit an expression of interest for the Leongatha Town Hall Cricket Club Change Facility Development and the Tarwin Lower Recreation Reserve Change Facility Development projects due to the estimated costs of the project. So, councillors, I also, in reading that out, also recall a number of briefing sessions you had on these projects.
Yep.
And I'm just wondering, is there any further clarification required for you here today before you to make a decision? Maybe, Mr Mayor, we might want to suspend standing orders to discuss this.
Motion to move to suspend standing
I'll move
orders.
that one.
Yeah, I'll
Second,
second
Councillor Hill. All those in
And
favour?
can we ask Penny
Well, we
perhaps
suspend standing orders.
for for any of the specifics?
I'm assuming through you, Mr Mayor, that the items 8 and 9 are pertinent to why this has come to us, because the community groups have said they don't want to proceed with something that they were recommended for, and there may well have been a date change as well, but this is really straightforward in the sense that we actually have had presentations from the other groups. They were in the queue and 2 others have dropped out. I presume that's what's happened, Mr Taylor.
Councillor Hill.
Do I have to send that now?
No.
Mr Chair, I just think a bit of clarification for the audience as to why the projects are all in Leongatha and Carnbarra, and some more information about the list of projects that you have in the background and how big what get onto that list might be helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor, and I think we're asking to see if Penny's available to come across. She'll be able to assist much better with some of the detail. She's not available. Some of the detail, I was just having a look at our records of the briefing sessions, but basically Council works with all of its community groups, and it's pretty much at random where they come from. We don't specifically target any one area. We're there to support all of our community groups, and it's those community groups that have the projects that meet the criteria of the grants that are the ones that get up. And that's why the last 2 have dropped off, because the costs that have come in are different to what was perhaps perceived. And we also, as you can see in the motion, that the clubs are also often putting money in as well, and then they have to give a commitment that if there's any cost overruns, they need to take care of that. So if they're not in a good financial position, they will ask us to say hold off perhaps to the next round. That's the sort of discussion that goes on. And then Council generally allocates money to support the grant as well. So there'll be a portion of Council, a portion of the SRV, state government, and then a portion from the community that comes together to deliver the project.
Through you, Mr Mayor, my understanding is also in Council's plan, we're talking about a project that tries to identify what the future priorities are in the recreation area. And I think that's going to be, we're going to have some input from the relevant director on that at some stage.
Councillor Skinner.
Got a question and a comment. Those 2 projects at the end, the Tarwin Rec Reserve and the Carnbarra Change Rooms one, were for a specific, the upgrade, female participation in sport and the upgrade program. And as we have heard here, the parameters, the funding can only be 100,000. The club has to provide funds as well, and then Council provides up to a certain amount to leverage. So usually they're about 250-ish type projects. But because the guidelines around that particular funding, the female participation in sport, unrealistic in terms of country football, netball, or rec reserve clubs. The clubs themselves can't meet those additional costs. So I know that even though they were gutted by it, they're very disappointed as in, they weren't shook, that's for sure. That's one of the reasons they withdrew from that. However, I know about the skate park project, and I know about the gymnasium one. My question is, this is the start of the financial year, and so maybe I would like to know from Penny why suddenly it's an urgent business. So obviously the dates have changed, but it wouldn't be because of those other two projects. And so if we do have money in the bucket for community, what are we calling it?
Infrastructure projects.
Is it our capital expenditure project, or is it particularly for sporting ones?
Sports and creation.
Targeted
No,
project.
that's the funding. Where's our
Community
bucket of
infrastructure
money?
project.
What's that called?
Oh, that's the
18, 19.
that's called the Community Infrastructure Projects budget.
Okay, so how much is in that, and are we doing, so we're asking to take out of that
When?
60 and, oh, just 60, is that correct?
No.
60,
And 50.
60
and
and
where's
100
the
and
other
100.
part, 100?
100.
260, Dawn?
No, that's applied for, and that's allocated. Yeah, and 60
So
allocated.
there's a report in November.
So that's 160.
No, that's the line.
160.
60,000 euros and 100,000.
Yeah, 160, and what's the,
It's the 50,000 out of the community capital works.
okay, so that's already there.
The Currumbara Rec Reserve, I've been on the council rep on that, and Councillor Skinner summed up pretty well the same thing with the TAR when it was regarding the ladies' change facilities. The requirements, and this is what it started off trying to get a grant, trying to meet what they want to, what their requirements are. It's not suitable for a country area, and it's far too expensive. So that's been disappointing for them. They've put a lot of work into that, but the initial project I think that they've got, I think needs about 400,000. So what do? Do you patch it? And I think they've just chosen to go that way. Currumbara Skate Park development, we've got 50,000 through the community fund that we did. So that's an important project, that skate park. So this is an opportunity to increase that, to get external funding. This is a real opportunity. If we miss that now, we've got this skate park that wants to go ahead, and $250,000 is needed for that skate park. This is, if we are desperate to get this park in Currumbara, and so I know the projects, we've had funding, we've had reports on them all, and I think take the opportunity while it comes, while it's there. Get that external funding.
Oh, sorry. I think Rick wants to say something. Yep.
In Penny's absence,
Rick,
in
yep.
Penny's absence, I'd like to clarify why this is urgent business.
Yes,
We put an expression of interest in for these two projects, the Sport and Rec Victoria. On Friday afternoon, we were invited to put in a full bond application. That application is due the same date as the next council meeting, 27th of September.
There you go. Thank you.
Okay, does that clarify?
Yes.
Perhaps we can
Yes.
move now. Councillor Keel.
Sorry. Oh, sorry. I'm actually along the lines of Councillor Hill. Just wanting to know, is there a list that obviously projects move up the list when this becomes available? Because, you know, we've had presentations from a lot of various groups that are looking for money, and they're nearly all sport and rec type people. So my thing is there a priority list there that we just go, yep, that's the next one off the list, and that's the next one off the list? I don't know.
Mr. Mayor, not so much not so much a list that just sits there. It's about having projects that are shovel ready. So as the community groups are doing their work and preparing their projects, they then come in and we generally, whatever's there, we support. So as soon as they're shovel ready, in they go. The last time, I was just having a look, the last time council considered this was in November and allocated some money out of the budget to do this sort of work. And there is sufficient funding in the current budget. I can say that because otherwise I would have been alerted that we're going over budget, and that hasn't come through like it would if that was the case. So I'm pretty confident to say that it's within the budget. I was just trying to triple check that for you.
I think we've got no other option other than support this in the circumstance. But what I have been arguing for some time, and it's I think what Councillor Keel was talking about, is that we really should have a master priority list, so there is some transparency and accountability. I understand what you were saying, Tim, that groups will come to us when there's a need, but we should have a master list so we've got some sense of what's going on, and then we wouldn't have a dilemma with this. We'd just say, well, we've got a priority on that list there, the next in line, because the others have withdrawn.
This is a perfect example of the state government deciding to release funds, and we have to be ready to take advantage when we can. And that's and the questions that Councillor Keel and everyone is asking is that how do we come up with our priorities? Obviously, I think that we should be strategic as a shire in terms of putting them together, working with our community groups to have them all in place. But even in amongst that, we can't sometimes choose that the state government says, we've got money for this type of funding today. So sometimes, even if we had our own priority lists, it wouldn't necessarily match with the way it works. So we have to look at ourselves as a shire and a region and go, well, okay, we've got our priorities and they're all ready, but the moment the state goes, hey, we've got $100,000 for this, we go, well, wait a tick, that means we get 2 for 1 on our dollar investment. That means that we are, we need to continually be somewhat adaptive, but with a strategic structure and plan in place so that it is open and transparent. We do need to be able to respond and obviously get as many fundings from elsewhere as we can, like these sort of projects.
Yes, and again, more on what Councillor Keel said. This is a sport and rec funding application that's grants tied to sport and rec reserves. In our plan, I'd note that we have as our goals for the 4 years to investigate the equitable spending of our money in the community, and that's in the sporting area, it's in the arts area, and in all the other areas. So we will be investigating those issues. But in this case, this is just funding tied with sports and rec. The only equitable area there would be, is it being directed to the central areas of the shire more so than the outer areas, and that will come out of the review in the next 4 years. But as this stands, it's still fine.
I move that
Have we got
resume standing
Resume
order.
standing order. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Sheeran, and then now we'll move on to the application.
You can debate in the session.
Somebody want to move the actual
Yes,
before us as well?
Councillor Hill.
Sorry, did we vote on
not Hill.
resuming? I think we all did.
Yeah, that
Rich.
was
Resuming.
ladies, we're all back in
Yeah,
session now.
all those in favour to resume standing orders, apologies.
That's
The next one is who wants to forward
Okay,
this
so
one?
who wants to move the actual motion?
Councillor Rich did, I think.
Second, Councillor Brown. So Councillor Rich. Wish to go straight to the vote?
I think so. I think we've had our reserves.
No,
you
reserve.
moved it.
You moved it. Speak, Jeremy.
Right.
Speak. You moved
Vote
it.
to speak
You have
to
to,
it,
Jeremy.
if you wish.
Well,
You can't reserve.
okay, I have to stand. We're back to normal. As we've just had the discussion, I think that the opportunity to get external funding to the Shire is something that we need to take advantage of. It is the way a state government works, is the shovel-ready projects, as I was discussing before, to do with seats. So it is certainly something I support strategically in terms of being able to get as much funding to our Shire, which is a proportionate amount of the state's pool, which interestingly is something that Councillor Hill and other councillors would like to do within our Shire. We would like to make sure that that distribution eventually happens evenly across, but for the time being, we have got an opportunity here to get some money for a well-presented project. It's to do with the skate park. It's been looked at, it's been considered, and so I implore all councillors to support this so that we can see if we can get the external funding.
Thank you, Councillor Rich. Councillor Brown?
Oh, Councillor Rich, you summed that up nicely. Very nicely. But the projects I know, I'm happy to support them. There's an opportunity. What it is, an opportunity, this is what makes our community very happy. If we were not to support this, we would have some very unhappy people in our community. There's a small, no, it's not a small amount, but we're certainly backing these projects up with our input, and I ask you all to support it. This is what our community expects of us. Thank you.
Councillor Skinner,
Sorry. Mr Mayor, formal motion, I move this to the vote.
to the vote. Okay. To the vote. All those in favour of the application?
That's unanimous, Mr Mayor.
Okay, do we have any public questions or petitions or joint letters?
No, Mr Mayor.
Answers to any previous questions on those?
No questions on those, Mr Mayor.
Answers. Submitted public questions.
And there are no submitted public questions today, Mr Mayor.
Okay, so now I move to close the session.
Is it possible to put an unsubmitted proposal that
No, that's going through the proper process.
it's very short?
Yes, I move the session to be closed. Councillors,
Yeah,
Go,
no.
media, staff.
Well, thank you, Mr Mayor. Do I get to have a cup of tea now? Is that what I'm allowed to do?
You get a call.
Yeah, close the meeting.
Yeah, so we'll take a short recess.
Yeah, that's good.
Close the meeting. Is there a close?
We've got to go into
So you have to
Yeah, but you haven't actually closed the meeting, right?